Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. Mike, before we get into this, I forgot to do this the last couple of episodes. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and even leave a comment if you feel so inclined to do so. It helps us. It really, really does. We love doing this show every week for you guys, so help us out. Like and subscribe on this video. Mike, are you ready to get into the craziness?
Yes, the nuttiness.
The nuttiness. I mean, there is so much going on today, and we're going to talk about it all. Our first question is actually from JJ Hogg, who says, if we made a change, we need multiple buyouts, money for a new coach and staff. Unless a donor gets mad enough and writes a massive check, we're stuck with Sam for a few more years until that ridiculous $12 million buyout decreases. Sigh.
You know, I like this because apparently JJ Hogg watches this show because this is what I've been saying for about a month. I've been giving the reasons. And the problem is we've got people out there that don't understand the difference between me pointing out why he's going to stay and thinking I'm telling Hunter Yurachek these are the reasons why he's going to stay. I don't make this decision. My job is to tell you, the fan, why he's not leaving, or if he were leaving, I would give you the reasons. Now, here's what's funny. A story, I say broke, it's not broke when somebody on the internet just says, hey, Randy Rainwater, and he's a radio guy in Central Arkansas a long time, just said that there's a press conference at 3 p.m. tomorrow and Sam Pittman's going to announce his retirement. And of course, then a few hours later when Rainwater became aware of the fact that this was up, he said, well, I've never spoken to you and I've never said anything like that. So unless there's another Randy Rainwater, no, there's not going to be a 3 p.m. press conference. So that, you know, was one more false claim that this guy was retiring. And people have been trying to claim he's a hip, he can't go on. It's going to be a hip thing now. Before it was that somebody was going to force him out. And so they were trying to dispute I wasn't the only one saying this.
No.
You were, a lot of people were.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I know you were discussing with me yesterday the possibility that Travis Williams would become the defensive coordinator at Florida State.
It was a rumor.
And that didn't work out because we found out today that the Nebraska defensive coordinator is going. It doesn't mean he wouldn't go take another job. But Sam Pittman said on Monday when he was asked about his staff and if he'd talked to him, he said, I have talked to him, but he said, I have to wait and see what they're going to do. So he left open the possibility that some of these coaches may be leaving. He said he wanted them all back and thought it was a good staff. So then the one thing that has traction, at least as we go on the air, is that Bobby Petrino, there was a picture of him going through the Charlotte airport along with a story last night about how he was going to interview for the UNC Charlotte job. And he was the leading candidate. And then there was all kinds of speculation. He's gone, he's gone, he's gone. Now, here we are the next day. He's been seen back in his office over at the University Athletic Department on campus. So he's back, and several hours, all morning has gone by, and there's been no reaction. So that leaves us speculating, what does all this mean? Well, it could mean a lot of things. To me, you go with the most logical, which is he wanted some kind of maybe he wanted a raise, maybe he wanted some sort of security, added security. We're going to give you a 3-year contract. If Pittman leaves or steps down, you'll be paid for 3 years. Something he wants, and he didn't get it.
Yeah. So
he goes and interviews for a job, and he does it very publicly, and then he comes back and says, "Okay, what are you going to do?"
Yeah.
That could be what's going on.
It's a very common tactic
Yeah,
used
we don't
by
know.
coaches.
But that's the only thing that's out there right now. But he is right. Pittman's not going anywhere. But what the funny part is that sometime this Monday morning, a national writer, who was this guy?
Yeah, Brett McMurphy.
Okay, he comes out and says, I can confirm Bobby Petrino, and I can see you.
You mean Sam Pittman.
Sam Pittman. I can confirm that Sam Pittman will come back, blah, blah, blah. And so I could see you, me, Trey Biddy,
Otis. We could throw everybody in there.
All these people that have been saying, hey, he's coming back. All of a sudden, this guy says it, and they're not mad at us anymore. They're mad at Yurachek and accepting of the fact that, yes, he is going to be back, And it's not the local media that's making it happen.
No.
We're just telling you it's going to, and by the way, we were right. So, but what a shock. And it's hilarious to me that a national guy can say this and it suddenly becomes fact, and they now accept it, where they weren't accepting it before.
But the funny thing too, and I've said this to so many people, is this is why your local media, I mean, the people here with boots on the ground have the best sources. We do. I mean, listen, I will give all the credit to Trey Biddy and Otis and all those guys. They have great sources, just like you and I do. And so when we tell you something and all of us have the same people telling us this, we're not trying to lie to you. We're not trying to, say something because you guys don't want to hear it or whatever. We're telling you what we've been told. So you can believe it or not, but it just makes me laugh when now Brett McMurphy says, oh my gosh, they act like we haven't been telling them for 5 weeks, or 3 weeks, or whatever it is.
On the Petrino thing,
Yes.
if he were to leave, this changes my opinion of what will happen next year, because from day one, I was a guy that suggested at the end of last season, with the way this team crashed and burned, I mean, a 48-10 loss to Auburn, a 48-14 loss to Missouri. They just collapsed at the end of the year. And I suggested, Sam, you said you would retire at the right time. Maybe you should go do that.
Yeah.
But Yurachek didn't make that decision, so I waited to see what would happen. And when he hired Petrino, I went, okay, now things are going to get better offensively. And they did. If he's not here, I seriously question who he's going to get.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he can't.
We all do.
I'm not saying he can't get somebody that will do that. But it's my personal opinion that most of the improvement that was done this year came about. You had an inconsistent offense, but it was a better offense. It's ranked 13th right now in total offense. They were nowhere close to that last year. So he came in year one, improved the offense. There's every reason to believe if you study his history, he'll improve it more in year two and even more in year three. That's the way he's always operated. The longer he's there, the better it's going to get, except when he was at Louisville, it went downhill. I don't know what happened there. But the point is, my attitude about whether or not this program will move forward next year changes dramatically, in my opinion, if they don't have him here. I would still wait and see who they hired if he left. Who would that be? And then I might change my mind if it was something that some person I never thought would apply for the job. But I just look at this and go, who wants this job right now?
That's a great question.
Because you're going into a very difficult situation. I call it a meat grinder in the SEC with all these really good programs, and right now you're standing in the bottom 8 of that 16-team conference, and you're trying to get into the top 8. Well, who's going to want to come here and try to do that when you know who those other 8 teams are in front of you, or 9 teams, or 10 teams?
Yeah,
they're really good. So I don't know. We'll see what happens here. He might not leave, but if he does, changes my mind about how successful they may be next year.
I think it changes a lot of people's mind. That's the sentiment that you're seeing right now. When this first got, and I guess when the news first broke that Bobby was even interviewing somewhere else, people said, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be terrible."
If indeed he wants something from them that they're unwilling to give, and you're a check, that's goofy.
I think it is goofy as well.
Totally goofy.
I mean, and a lot of people also said this to me. They said, "Courtney, Charlotte's a step down. It's a step down." I kind of thought about this, and Jacob made a good point off air before we went on. He said, they paid the last guy at Charlotte $1 million a year. He said, if they want a guy like Bobby, he was no Bobby Petrino. If they want a guy like Bobby, if he wants another
job, he could also be interviewing for that job for the actual North Carolina job or something like that.
Sure, he could be using
there's a lot of possibilities, and we don't know which one though.
We don't. Jimmy Hogball says, "I thought we outplayed Mizzou most of the game, but fumbles killed us once again. What do you think it is? Poor coaching, lack of arm strength, poor technique, or just bad luck, Mike?"
Well, obviously there's a turnover issue, and you don't want to sugarcoat that. It's real.
28 fumbles.
It's real.
In a season.
But when you start looking at it, the simple statement, the coaches aren't coaching them, they aren't doing the right thing, it's way more complicated than that. I'm going to try to explain it. Because every coach I've ever watched, and I've watched a lot of them when I've gone to their practices, they all do some form of ball security drill every day. And usually what happens is they take their position groups that carry the ball, quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, and they all line up in a row, and then one of them starts running along this little thing. Not running hard, they're just trotting. and they've got the ball here in their arm and their hand over it, and guys are reaching out and trying to knock it loose, okay? And they do that several times. So they're doing that every day. Well, let me explain to you that when you're in a game, and especially if you're a running back or you're a quarterback who's running, or if your receiver's running after the catch, how far are you going to get if you're running like this, with your hand over the ball and your arms inside like this? How fast are you going to be able to run like that? You ever see somebody run like that in a game? You know, when they see you like that, it's when you're about to be tackled. When they start to wrap you up, then you do that. We got a couple of running backs, and I'm not going to name them, but we got a couple of running backs that didn't do that several times this year, and they fumbled the ball. That part is inexcusable. That's the part that the drill teaches you to do. But the drill is not a solution for every problem, because the fact of the matter is, if there were a way to prevent fumbles completely, nobody would fumble. When you're running with the ball, you have to swing your arms. What caused the Taylon Green fumble in the Missouri game was he rolled out, decided to run, he was going to his right, and he cut back to his left. His right arm flared out a little bit. And when it did, somebody from behind him reached out and bumped it out. That happens. That doesn't mean he was being careless at that point. He can't run around the corner like this. He's going nowhere if he does that. So you need to understand that. There are other possibilities, okay, the picks that he threw. Now we're getting into he made bad decisions at times. I was asked this morning, what did I, on the radio, what did I like most about this season? What was a favorite moment? There wasn't a favorite moment, but what I liked most about this season was when Taylon Green did the really cool things, because that's the stuff that entertains you as a fan when you're watching. He pulled off some amazing throws, and he did in the Missouri game. Remember when there was 1:50 left and they just lost the lead again, and they got to somehow get it, which means you got to do a 2-minute offense against that defense, and he was having to roll out under pressure. He rolled out from midfield one time under pressure, and he was about to be tackled, and he uncorked a throw that went all the way down into the end zone, and I think it was Isaac Tesla had his hands up there, and it's right in his hands, and the only reason he didn't catch it and win the game was a Missouri D-back came along and knocked it out right at the right moment. It was perfect timing. But that was Taylon Green making that amazing play. The same guy earlier in the game needed a first down. It was a third down situation, and I think it might have been Luke Haas. It was somebody coming across the middle, and all you got to do is just chunk it out there about 8 yards, and he threw it behind him. And it's a terrible pass. So he does that. These are these extremes that we're talking about.
It's the inconsistencies that people, that's.
And so how do you correct that? I don't know. I've been thinking that it comes with experience, but he's still doing it. And I can't tell you that he's not going to do it next year if he's the quarterback next year. I can't. All I can tell you about replacing him, if you're thinking that he should be, is that Bobby Petrino hasn't replaced him. He started him in every game. And I'm going to go with his opinion over your opinion, whoever you are, because I trust him more. I know what he does, and you don't do that. That's not your job. You're not there at practice every day. You don't see those guys. You're not in meetings with them. No. So how can you determine that one of those quarterbacks would be better prepared to be the starter than he is?
Yeah, and I'll also say this to everyone asking. We talk about the fumbles, and you talk about those ball security drills. And I had somebody ask me the question, well, did you guys see that in practice this year? And I said, well, we didn't get to go to practice this year. Even if it was for a little bit, it was completely closed off during the season. And so we know they worked on that, in the fall. We know they worked on that in the spring. And I'm going to go with what Sam Pittman says, that they work on it every week in practice.
Every day.
Every day, yes. Every day in practice. It just, when you see the stat of 28 fumbles in a season, I understand it happens, Mike. I understand it happens. It does. But 28 in a season, to me, that there's just, that's a red flag.
Maybe.
That is a red flag, and I'm going,
some of those fumbles maybe shouldn't have happened, but there are reasons why some of them did happen. Now, look, when I watch an entire season, and I've seen 49 of them, and you go back and reflect when it's over, there have been seasons, there are random things that happen in the course of a season, in the course of a single game that you don't control. For instance, how many people are talking about the fact that Arkansas, the game was tied with Missouri at halftime, Arkansas came back out, stopped them, got the ball, went right down the field and scored. Now you got a 7-point lead, and you kick off, and their guy fumbles.
Yeah.
And it's about the 25, 30-yard line where he fumbles. And if you watch the replay, the ball comes out. 3 Razorbacks are around that ball. It comes out. It hits. They all reach down for it, and it bounces over to where the one Missouri guy is.
I saw that.
That is a random thing that you do not control, okay? Now, here's what I will also say. There are seasons in which you get breaks at critical moments instead of the thing going the other way. What about the Henry heave? Have you ever asked yourself about that? Did Hunter Henry have eyes in the back of his head and know that he could throw it 30 yards backwards and Alex Collins would be standing right there
perfectly.
and there would be nobody around him and he could make the first down by a yard? That's just random stuff.
It's miraculous. Exactly.
That's not coaching. That's not planning. That's not a lack of anything. It just happened. That team was lucky several times that year. Razorback teams that have been unsuccessful have been unlucky at several times. You get some years when you have it and some years when you don't. This team made some of its own bad breaks, but a lot of that stuff was not controllable. It just happened.
Yeah, made some of their own bad breaks. I mean, I think why people are so upset over this season, because really, I mean, I had someone say to me the other day, why, and they're not a fan of Arkansas, they aren't. They said, why is your team so mad, or why are your fans so mad about a 6-6 season? Because that's a bowl game, and there's a lot of programs that would be really happy with that. And I said, I honestly think it's because they could have been so much more.
Okay.
I mean, we look at the losses, right? Mm-hmm. We look at the losses. Oklahoma State, an absolutely winnable game. Texas A&M, an absolutely winnable game. You know, you look at this Missouri game, an absolutely winnable game. I would argue that Texas is a winnable game. And so you look at these games, and they could have had such a better season. And you look and you go, well, they lost those games, and why? And I don't think it's because they didn't have the talent. I really don't. I think there's something to be said about the coaching staff in those losses, and I think there's something to be said about the worst enemy of the Razorbacks is themselves. They shot themselves in the foot in those losses.
And the second worst enemy of the Razorbacks is those people on the internet that exaggerate everything. Right. Those people are saying right now this team is really no better than last year. Really? Okay,
well,
let's see. Last year, at home, you lost to these guys 48-14. Which is better? Losing 48-14 or have a game which is still undecided with 6 seconds left in the game at their place? Auburn beat you 48-10 here.
Yeah,
this year you went to their place and beat them. You didn't beat a top 10 team last year, a team that's going to the playoffs. Those are reasons why this team is better.
Sure.
If you're going to tell me they're not better, that no improvement was made, I'm going to laugh in your face.
No, and I'm not arguing that.
All you're trying to do is to exaggerate, to make your point that you should fire this guy.
And I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying I understand. I'm going to use that word. I understand the disappointment. I do. I really do. I mean, I'm pretty disappointed myself, honestly. John Dews says Missouri fans legitimately trolling Arkansas has to be nearing the bottom, right? Right? Please give us hope.
You know, to me, the only hope goes with how you improve this team if the coaching staff doesn't change, and it may, but the only other way you improve it is by bringing in better players through the portal. And Sam Pittman has said they have more NIL money available. We're in a period now where they're going to lose some guys, they're going to bring some guys in. It's going to be a while before you know. So if you want hope, watch Otis Kirk. Keep up with him as he follows this portal class, because that's what you have to do. You have to see what's the sum total. And you'll have a portal class that opens December 15th, but then you're also going to have one after spring football, and that portal class will reflect the revenue sharing, which is new, and they'll be able to bring people in with money through revenue sharing. So what's the sum total? How do you replace what you have with what you will have? Who leaves? Who doesn't leave? Who stays? Do you end up with better people? And it's going to be months before you know that. So that's the only hope you're going to have.
It is, and also Otis Kirk made a really good point on our Arkansas football recruiting report. He's worked for some of those sites for years and years and years and years, and he says, you know, a lot of it, to be fair, is very subjective.
It's very subjective.
And he's like, I don't pay attention to those rankings. He knows people do, and he absolutely understands that. But he's like, I don't pay attention to those rankings because I know how they're built. I know how they're done, and I just think it's very subjective. So again, Our Arkansas football recruiting report goes into that. It's on our YouTube. Go check it out. Hog Redneck asks, what is up with Missouri's players and fans? They act like there's some sort of long-standing feud going on with Arkansas, trying to start fights, throwing snowballs at our players. That's not normal. And WV Hog fan has a similar question to that. He wants to know, what do you attribute to all the scuffles that occurred in several games on Saturday?
Well, the scuffles were with what I would call the blood rivalry teams. These are teams that have hated each other for decades, A&M and Texas.
Florida State, Florida, that was a big one.
When you get teams where the players genuinely don't like each other, you're going to get that stuff. And it's not good, but it happens. Now, what was going on in that Missouri game was pretty much one-sided is what I was able to see. It looked like one or two Missouri guys were wanting to start fights, and the Arkansas people were, when they got shoved or swung at, they would respond, but they didn't start it. And I think this brings up, once again, this disconnect where what happened when Missouri came into this league, I just think they bought into the idea that the SEC said, this is your rival now. You left this league you were in, you have to have a rival that's Arkansas. And they bought into it, and Razorback fans who were used to having LSU as their Thanksgiving weekend rival, and what's this all about? Well, the SEC gave them to A&M for a while until Texas came back in, and now LSU's had that taken away from them.
Yeah.
And now they've got Oklahoma, and they're going, we don't want Oklahoma.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. There's a question about that.
So again, this is part of what I've always said, and people keep saying stuff, well, Arkansas better consider them a rival or they're beating us every year. Well, the players do, but you can't tell fans who your rival is. I think if the day comes when Arkansas starts winning this series more often than not, I think Razorback fans will go, good, I'm glad that happened. But they're not going to go bonkers. It sort of reminds me of when there was a period of time right before Houston Nutt was fired where SMU was beating Arkansas, and Razorback fans were annoyed by that, but they didn't see them as a rival. It was an old Southwest Conference thing. So the first game of the Houston Nutt era, the very first game, which was in Little Rock, they beat SMU pretty badly. And the reaction from the fans was, okay, we're glad that's over. Now let's play football. They didn't go bonkers, storm the field, or anything like that. I don't think Razorback fans, here's what it would take to make them feel differently about Missouri in terms of they're a big rival. Missouri would have to win the SEC a couple of times, be national, go to the playoffs, do something in the playoffs. Then you're looking at them and going, those guys are really good. If we beat them, that's great. Right now they look at them, okay, they've been better than us, but we would rather have LSU as a rival. Ole Miss, which you had as a rival all the way back even in the Southwest Conference days, Arkansas played Ole Miss in non-conference games. So it's those long-standing things that fans react to, not some new thing where you just tell people, oh, they're your rival.
Exactly. It has to have some history. I feel like all the great rivalries have a lot of history.
And that's what we were seeing mainly last week was teams that had histories with each other.
Exactly, and that's why you got all those fights. I mean, genuinely, they did a highlight reel.
The fights in the Missouri-Arkansas game were kind of like, and then it was over.
And then it was over. No, the other ones were, they were heated fights. But speaking about rivalries, Big Daddy Kane wants to know, on the Thanksgiving weekend games with Texas A&M playing Texas, why can't we play LSU and let Missouri play Oklahoma? Mizzou and OU played for decades in the Big 8/12.
Yeah, and there's some indication that even LSU fans are thinking that way.
Absolutely. Well, the LSU Barstool account, which, again, I don't agree with a lot of things that any Barstool accounts put out. They're usually quite wild in their takes. But they put out a tweet that said, hey, why don't we play Arkansas on Black Friday? Why did that go away? Why can't we do that again? We don't care about OU. We don't care about Oklahoma. Let Oklahoma and Missouri play.
And there is a long history between Missouri and Oklahoma.
And that's what they made the point.
So maybe somebody, some AD will make a point of it and talk to Greg Sankey and get his attention. He tends to ignore that stuff, but maybe they can make him pay attention.
I don't know about that. Maybe it's all about money, right, though? It's all about money. Maybe
it will be 2026
lucrative
before you end up with these permanent rivals, so we'll see.
We'll see. And it also, there could be something said about Oklahoma and Oklahoma State coming back on rivalry week as well. That could come back, and maybe that's what they're preparing for. I think it's going to return.
Because they do let South Carolina and Clemson play on rivalry week.
Florida State play on rivalry week. There's a lot. Georgia Tech. There's a lot of out-of-conference games that get played on rivalry week. So, again, I think that it's gone right now, but I think it's going to make a return, so that would affect it. Lanny says a lot of fans seem to think it's time to hire Rhett Lashley. Is there any reason to think that he's interested in coming back to Arkansas?
I think if he had any real interest, it would have circulated through the media here. We would have found out and would have been reporting that. There's been none of that. The word I get on Lashley is he likes it where he is, because why would he want to come here? He's got a huge NIL budget. He's in a conference that he can dominate. You beat 2 or 3 teams every year, and you've won your conference. You come into this league, and there's about 10 of them you'd have to beat. So why would he want to do that? So I think he's got no interest in coming back here. Just because he played at Shiloh Christian and he was a quarterback at Arkansas and didn't start doesn't mean he has a burning desire to come back here. He's coaching now. It's the real world.
Yeah, he's also got a pretty sweet spot there, too, with, again, SMU, we know they've got money. They do. He's got a pretty sweet spot. And I don't know his exact numbers of deals. We don't get to know, NIL numbers or anything like that. Those are not public. But I would say they've got money there. So and also he just signed that contract, extension, right? New contract.
Probably got a bunch of money.
Yeah, I don't see why he would come, but yeah, again, you can't say never, right? Edward Clutch says, Sam is a likable guy, but come on now, it's time to move on. Bielema got fired for similar results, and yet now, because Morris was terrible for 2 seasons, a lower tier bowl game is now considered good enough. Look
at how it's changed, though, since Bielema was fired. When Bobby Petrino got fired, and they had John L. Smith, had him for an interim for a while. Look who Jeff Long was able to go get. He was able to go get Brett Bielema, who'd been highly successful at Wisconsin. The last 2 times that job was open, who was available? Chad Morris. And then when he got fired, you know who really wanted that job? 2 guys, Barry Lenny Jr. and Sam Pittman. Neither one of them had ever been even a coordinator before. And that's what you got. Now, you think that's different now, 5 years later? I don't see it different. So the situation is different. That's what I'm telling you. When you start assuming why Hunter Yurachek is doing what he's doing, you're not in his shoes. He knows what's out there. He knows what he's likely able to bring in as a head coach if he has to make a change. And my guess is he's looking at it and realizing what happened the last time, and he's going, what's changed? Now, I do think there's a guy out there, Barry Odom, who's been successful, and that would be a logical thing, and it might be a good thing to do at some point. My guess is what Yurachek is doing at this point is watching Odom maybe another year or 2. He's been successful now, but you want to make sure. You don't want it to be when Arkansas has hired coaches in different situations, and they hire a guy that had a great year. And then what happens after that?
Oh my gosh.
1 or 2 years doesn't mean you're going to have sustained success. So maybe Yurachek is looking at Barry Odom and saying, I want to see a little more out of you. I don't know that that's the case, but it seems logical.
Yeah, that definitely seems logical. And I also think Edward Clutch, his last part, a lower tier bowl game is now considered good enough. I like what he says there, because I really ask if that's what the standard is now. It's just like, oh, lower tier bowl game, yay, we're celebrating it. And
I think it was the standard this year,
right?
Based on what happened last year.
I hope it's not the standard moving forward.
It won't be the standard next year, I promise you.
I hope not. I really hope not.
People do not understand that most of the time you don't climb out of a hole in one giant step. It's a degree here. You won 4 games, now you're going to win 6. How about 8? How about then 10? Now you've done it through 3 or 4 years. There are examples of coaches that have been hired, come in and jump it up. Indiana this year.
Yeah, that's a good
example.
Yeah.
But that's not very reasonable. It doesn't happen very often.
It's not, and especially when you talk about, and everybody hates this excuse, but we still, again, everything that you and I have heard, the NIL situation just hasn't been up to par. And so I also think that does factor in when you're looking at getting guys out of the portal and keeping guys and all of that.
I think Hunter Yurachek wants to see what Sam Pittman does with an even playing field on this money, because when you get revenue sharing, it evens things out.
Exactly. And then also, I don't know if we mentioned this, but you talk about paying a buyout, right? I've said this to so many people. they want to be set up for revenue sharing as best as they can.
You got to meet the cap.
You have got to meet the cap, or otherwise you're going to be left in the dust.
That's
You
right.
are, and they know that. So why pay $12 million right now? I'm sorry, and I'm not advocating for Sam to stay.
I read on the internet, some fans, and they aren't Arkansas fans, talking about their own situation. They're saying, you know what, right now, I would rather spend that money on players than a new coach.
There is a lot of people who do say that. So I agree with that, because I'm going, okay, you want to be set up in the best possible situation. When that hits, all right, see what you can do, I guess. Thunderhawk Jr. says, since both Arkansas and Arkansas State are bowl eligible, what is the chance that they get matched up in a bowl game?
Okay,
None.
there's some weird bowl. You may remember the name. It's in Mobile. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, it's a weird one.
And it's a mid-major type bowl.
Yes.
The tie-ins are mid-major type teams,
Yes.
Sunbelt type teams.
Yeah.
The SEC would have to say, you know what, we're going to change the rule for this one Arkansas. We're going to let them play a mid-major. That would be insulting to Arkansas. I can't believe that Hunter Yurachek would allow it. I don't think Greg Sankey would do it.
No.
But if he tried it, I think Hunter Yurachek would say, what are you trying to make us look stupid?
Yeah.
All these other SEC teams play another Power 4 conference teams, but we
yeah.
have to play a mid-major. I just don't think it's going to happen.
I don't see it happening either. And again, a lot of people, I think, well, Courtney, what if there's too many SEC teams and not enough SEC bowl games to go around, right, with SEC tie-ins? They have flipped some tie-ins before to reflect that, but they usually flip another one with a Power 4 conference tie-in.
Right.
So
that would do that. You might
do
not
that,
have a tie-in with the ACC in a certain, but they would go ahead and make an exception.
Exactly. So I don't see it happening at all. TOGDS. Okay, I got that right. In the November 25th Ask Mike, you were asked about bowl games and if there are too many. This is part of your response. Players put an entire year of their lives into each season. They want some kind of reward. To me, that answer no longer applies to today's college players, given the amount of players who abandon their respective team and sit out the bowl game.
Well, how many say the amount of players? That's not consistent. It's different from team to team.
Yeah.
But how many really do that? Is it 10? Is it 15? 25?
Well, you don't know. I mean, you don't know until it happens.
Know. But what I'm saying to you is in most situations, you're still going to have most of your players available for that bowl game. So because some of them decided to opt out, you're going to tell the rest of them, sorry, you can't have a bowl game because a bunch of guys decided not to play in it. So therefore, it must not be important. It's not their fault. So you're going to punish them for what some other guys do. That's not logical to me.
Yeah, it's not logical. And then the other thing, too, is Jacob and I were talking about this the other day, and he said that's the reason I like watching bowl games, because I like seeing some of those younger players get a shot and seeing what they can do. It's kind of exciting. It's kind of fun. Pat Boat wants to know, why is it that we hear about all the guys in spring ball like Gums, Tevis Metcalf, or Davion Dozier, but they never see the field in the season?
Because in the spring, you're trying to develop backup players into players that maybe make the two deep. The spring is, I'm not saying you don't concentrate on your starters, but the spring is not about your starters so much as it's about bringing up new players. And so you may have a redshirt freshman or a freshman who redshirted, so as a redshirt freshman you may want to play him more, even a redshirt sophomore. You may have a transfer portal guy and you're not sure. So you work more with those guys in the spring. And then what happens? When the practice is over, we're interviewing the coaches and they talk these guys up because they're trying to motivate them. A guy hears his coach say his name, it pops up on the internet or it pops up on a local television, they get excited.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to do, trying to motivate them. And we go along with it. But sometimes it gets into the fall and they don't do what the coaches wanted them to do, so they don't make the two deep. You're not going to say, well, we gave this guy a lot of publicity in the spring, but he's really not good enough to make the two deep, but let's go ahead and put him in there anyway because we told people that he might be good. They don't do that.
Well, and two, I want to bring up the fact is that sometimes your starters are injured during spring ball or even fall ball, and so they may not play in some of those scrimmages or things like that, and then it's next man up, and that's who the coaches are talking about because they were active in practice that day. So That's okay. Who were we talking about today? The guys that we've seen today. Boa Hog 68 says, love our strength coach's energy on the sidelines. However, what can he do in off-season workouts to improve the number of sacks the O-line gives up and lack of sacks or QB rushes our D-line gets? Last few years, this has been bad for the Hogs.
Well, don't mistake the fact that you may get your guys in the proper condition and get them physically ready. Don't mistake that with the techniques that are sometimes needed to play on the offensive and defensive lines. You may be good physically, you may have endurance, and you may not have good footwork. You may not have good blocking techniques. Those things are developed in real practices. So there's only so much your strength and conditioning coach can do. I know when he talked last summer, he was touting the defensive line. He said, wow, they're going to have a lot of sacks. And they didn't. He was projecting because he was based on they're bigger and stronger and quicker. But there were other things out there that happened that it just wasn't that kind of year. As we've gotten more toward the end of the year, they've done a better job of that, but it just didn't develop the way he thought they would.
Sam Pittman even mentioned that halfway through the year. He said sometimes about, because it was asked, why aren't they getting sacks? And he said sometimes sacks are situational. It's whatever you're going up against and whatever you're combating. So to kind of go into your point there, Eddie Lynn asks, are you surprised that Texas beat A&M so easily in College Station? It looked like they went into that giant stadium and said, we will kick your butts and make you like it.
I was surprised because I thought A&M would win, but I'm not surprised because this has been going on with A&M going all the way back to when I was a little kid. I've talked about this before. If you think Razorback fans are frustrated right now, how would you like to be an Aggie? You hate Texas. You got out of the Big 12 because you didn't want to play them anymore, and you thought you were away from them. And then the stinking SEC office that always wants more team and more money came in and said, oh, no, we're going to invite them, and they didn't even give A&M a choice. They tried to block it, and they wouldn't let them. So now we got to play them again. Okay, we don't have a choice, but hey, they got to play us at our place first. This is our year. We can make the SEC championship game. They're new in the league. We'll deny them the SEC championship game. We will go, and we'll just go to you.
Yeah.
And they had that big stadium. And they did that big.
The fans are bringing it, you know.
It was all there. And then what happened? Texas just walked into that place and went, oh, loud noise. Okay, you bunch of crazy Aggies. Okay, we're going to beat you. And then what they do when it was over? They did what they always do, which I hate these guys for this, but they got the whole wad of them out there along with their stupid band, and they played, and they played the Eyes of Texas, and they all did their hook 'em horns thing, and they just dominated that place. What they were doing is say, we've marked your territory with our scent, and what are you going to do about it?
Oh, my
They
goodness.
do that, and it's annoying. Well, how annoying do you think it is to the Aggies? But what could they do? They just all kind of left the stadium and went, oh, it happened again. And the only way they deal with it is they forget about it. And next year it'll be all different.
It's been interesting to watch Texas A&M in this last part of the season because while some teams have been on an upward trajectory, South Carolina, for example, Texas A&M was on a bit of a downward trajectory. And so it's just been interesting to see what's happened in November in this last month
They just
here.
became Aggies again.
They
I'm
just
sorry
became
that happened.
Aggies.
I wanted them.
They regressed. They just said.
I wanted them to win that game, but when it started happening, I went, uh-oh, it's this thing again.
There was quite a few people that were torn on who they wanted to root for in that game, but I heard a lot of people were like, I like the chaos. I like, what if Texas A&M beat them and then got to go to the championship game.
When they were asking Sarkisian when it was over, yeah, what did you think about coming in here and this place was a rocking crazy house and he just I'll say, we won. He just acted like it was no big deal. Because that's the way they treat teams that they beat. You were not a factor. We knew we were going to win.
Yeah, H.L. McCamish wants to know, is this talk about the SEC dominating the playoffs a bunch of bluster? Based on what I've seen, I think the SEC is overrated this season.
I'm not sure that it's overrated, but it's so tough that these teams beat each other up. Now, we'll see if it affects the number of teams that get in. If they get 4 in, no complaints. If it's just 3, they're going to start to complain.
A lot of people
But what I think it's going to do eventually, if something doesn't happen, is it's going to start affecting the seeding of SEC teams in the college football playoffs, the NCAA basketball tournament, the NCAA baseball tournament, women's tournament at the end. Some of these things, the women's softball, some of these, in basketball, some of these SEC teams will be seated lower than other teams that are in the field because they lost more games, because they were in a tougher conference. I think they overreached, I do. I think they got so greedy, they wanted to be so powerful that we got to add more teams, we got to add more teams. And they may not be through. We may still see a thing where the Big Ten and the SEC form their own super conference and kick out a bunch of other people.
We might, because I mean, if you're...
And it's greed if they do that. I won't be for that.
If you're so much ahead of everybody else, right? If your league is so much more competitive...
And the TV networks will be all for it because they just want big games. They just want monster games.
Oh, yeah, and you're going to get that if you have all SEC teams, you know, just playing all the time. I mean, you'll get that, so...
I watched... Somebody put up on my, they had a link to it on my phone last night. It was a link to a YouTube thing that showed the 1976 Arkansas-Texas game. It was the last game for Darrell Royal and the last game for Frank Broyles. And I sat there and watched that game with Keith Jackson and Ara Parsegian, and they were talking about it. And I was watching the way the game was done, and I was going, I wish football was like that again. Instead of all the goofy graphics they throw all over everything, Keith Jackson was such a good announcer, and they knew what was happening, and they explained it correctly. And there were all these things that were going on, and it was old, but it was good, you know? And I found myself thinking, what was wrong with the Southwest Conference? What was wrong with, you know, an 8-team conference? What was wrong when the SEC had 8 teams? What was wrong with the Pac-8, you know, when they all had 8 teams? Okay, they had to go to 10, and then they went to 12. But do they have to go to 14 and then 16? And then are we going to go to something where we just combine everything into one
32-team super conference,
yeah, and
right?
then you just kick everybody else out, and we just say to heck with all these other teams.
I hate to say it, but it's going to be so crazy to see what happens in the future with these super conference ideas, because it scares me. It really does. I'm like you.
Sometimes the old ideas are the best ideas.
I agree with you there. I agree with you. Razor Alex 88 says our 2025 recruiting class has slipped to 15th in the SEC. It is very concerning to be passed by the likes of Mississippi State. Hopefully the coaching staff hits the transfer portal hard and comes away with some grand slam transfers.
Well, first of all, Sam Pittman said this a couple of years ago. Their high school recruiting takes a back seat right now to the portal, and that's part of what's going on there. So the thing you need to keep an eye on is not that high school recruiting class, which is now their 2026 class is in the top 10 right now. I don't know if it'll stay there. But there's some indication that my guess is they've been able to offer some people some money. Hey, if you come here, this is what you'll get based on the revenue sharing, and it's already improved your high school recruiting for 2026. But keep an eye on the portal class this year. That's what matters.
Absolutely. And again, I mentioned what Otis said about these rankings, and I do agree with him on this. A lot of them are subjective. Now, does that mean you should completely not pay attention to them? No, we're not saying that. Should they be better than 15th in the SEC? Absolutely. But you're exactly right. The portal right now, what's important is getting guys in that you can plug and play, that have experience, that have had some development somewhere else, and you can get them in and they can make something happen for you in year one, right? To basketball now, where Hog Dogger, asked about that loss to Illinois. What happened? Is John L. gonna going to get going on shooting soon? Defense was missing in action. That one was a hard one to watch, guys.
Look, watching a lot of basketball in my life, anybody that knows it, watches games knows this. There are teams that get hot on certain nights and you're not going to beat them. Going into that game, Illinois had averaged about 32 threes a game. That was their thing.
They take a lot of threes.
Take a lot of threes. They were hitting about 33% of them.
Sure.
In this game, they actually put up 31, which is one less than their average, but they hit
15.
Hit 15, so that's right, just a tick under 50%.
Yeah.
If you shoot that many threes and hit half of them, you're going to beat people. It's just, they might not do that again for 2-3 more years.
They might, but that's the point about the game plan, right? Because you had Chin Coleman say earlier that week, look, they asked about Illinois and they asked about the game plan. And he sat there and said, they take a lot of threes. We want to limit those attempts. We don't want them jacking up 32 threes or 31 threes. We want to limit those attempts. What happened? Y'all didn't limit those attempts, so that didn't happen.
There might have been a few wide open threes, but they hit some with people on them.
They did but there was also
I had a feeling that
some
of those guys
open.
could have put the ball in their mouth and went and just blew it into the thing.
They were hot, but you don't want to let them get going. That's the thing.
Yeah,
Don't let them do that. Don't make it hard on them. 3-point defense, make it hard. That's all I'm saying. And then two, you had Coach Cal saying, you wouldn't believe our game plan going in offensively was get to the basket.
Yeah, that's where they
we
screwed
jacked
up
a lot of threes. They're not a 3-point shooting team.
I'm telling you, when you're playing somebody and they do it,
you start to want to do it.
We do that too.
No.
You get suckered, rope-a-dope.
And our last question is also about basketball, so we're going to kind of continue this conversation with Marty Bird's Proxy, who wants to know, would you agree that Davis still isn't completely 100%? That combined with Adu not being healthy either have limited the basketball team maybe more than we realize.
Well, the problem is we don't know.
Yeah.
John L. has that. He has that wrist.
He's been dealing with that wrist, but we don't know.
Unless you're him, he hasn't talked about it. I think it's probably healed, but maybe what we're talking about is he just has to get back to where he was shooting. You got to have confidence. You got to get you have to kind of completely reinvent yourself again.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going on with him. He has been shooting it better lately.
Yeah, and he's being utilized in a different role
way,
in Coach Cal's system. And Kevin McPherson made this point yesterday on our Hog Hoops report that maybe he's adjusting to that a little bit as well. Who knows? That is what he said.
Now with Adu, what I look at is the way he moved. He played 21 minutes. That's the most he's played. Mm-hmm. He only scored 2 points. He had a tip in that looked nice. He had a couple of rebounds, 3 rebounds, I think. Played reasonably good defense. Wasn't anything spectacular.
No.
But what I was looking at was the way he moved. And he looked like he was moving okay for the first time.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of times where I was thinking he was going to leap up and get a rebound or something like that. And it kind of looked like he was maybe a little bit gingerly hopping up. I don't know.
Well,
I just don't think he's 100%. That's just my opinion.
I think he's probably okay, but I think they were being cautious. And now let's look and see what he does from here on out.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it'd be nice to see him do a little bit more because when you have
those two guys have to come along. I mean,
they do.
Davis has got to hit threes. He's got to get back into what he was, why they recruited him, why he was the top player in the portal, and then Adu has to become a guy that can probably play 60% of the minutes and let Big Z play 40.
Yeah, absolutely, because
that's
what they wanted to do.
You let Brazil kind of go in and augment either one of them. In other words, sometimes you may be playing 2 bigs at one time.
Yeah, I think that's their plan. It just hasn't been able to happen because these guys haven't been healthy, and that's what they talked about. Marty Bird's Proxy says, has this limited the basketball team maybe more than we realize? Well, yeah, it has, because we've been sitting here telling you, if this team's not healthy, I changed my prediction on them
absolutely.
in the season. So
you got to have those 2 guys playing.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We're going to see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.